All right, we're back. We're live. What's up, everyone? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today I'm with Grant, the founder of Copernic. How's it going, Grant?
Very good. Lots on the table. Just released a new article actually on the majority of the topic we'll be discussing today on social media. So more on my plate than I can handle sometimes, which is a good problem to have. At least someone cares about what we're doing.
Definitely more than care, man. Cosmos, one of my favorite books of all time. Hey, okay, let's just dive into the deep end. I like to start with maybe a paragraph or two on Copernic. What are you guys building? We can keep it kind of short for now, but we'll come back to it and double click maybe later on in the interview. But yeah,
Yeah,
kick us off. Tell
yeah.
people.
So Copernic Space is a financial operating system and marketplace for the space economy and the space asset class. So the space market is set to be one of the largest, and if not the largest, markets and eventual asset classes on Earth. But no one's yet built really how it operates in financial and commercial realms in the modern and digital age. So instead of focusing really on, let's say, the physical infrastructure of space, the rockets, the satellites, or whatever data software that comes out of that, we're focused on the financial and commercial infrastructure, which if you look in history at any major new transformative market all the way from the first era of exploration, those are the things that were really needed, that made it pop and enabled more people and entities to become beneficiary stakeholders, while at the same time fueling the great entrepreneurs and visionaries that are building those markets. And I think space is that final kind of frontier. We were laughing before about it being the unlimited or the limitless sort of market, and one that really affects humanity and Earth in more ways than people realize.
Yeah, it's funny there because you said it's the largest space is the largest market potentially on Earth. As I was preparing for I think our last call, I remember I was just like, I'm so in the trenches helping founders with scope out market size, and I always tell people market size counterintuitively is like the most important thing that investors think about when they look at a deal. And then when I was looking at you and I was looking through your deck, I was thinking like, wait, hold on, like what's the market size of space? Like it literally goes to infinity. I mean, you start mining shit up there or whatever it is, and it's game over. So
Yeah,
super pumped. Yeah.
I think it's an onion where those layers are going to be continuously kind of, unwrapped when it comes to it. And we're kind of just scratching the surface now, and it's almost at 1 trillion.
Insane. Yeah, space is one of those things that, like as a kid, you're just like thinking about it all the time, right? Like, well, what is this? You look up at the sky, but as you get older, you kind of get numb to it a little bit. But any conversation around it, I'm here for it. I had the good fortune also of working for a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jacob Apkarian for 8 years. He was one of the lead people behind the Canada Space Arm. Worked on a lot of robotics projects that involve space. So let's take it back. So you're what, a third generation space guy, right? Walk us back. Who was your grandfather? What did he actually build in Poland?
Yeah, so my father's mother, and we'll get into my mother as well soon, I'm sure. He built the original space program in Poland in the 70s and 80s. So he's originally was a professor in the Air Force, and as with everything, these things kind of come out of the Air Force originally in history, and was responsible also for pushing Poland to be the fourth nation that shot up an astronaut. Hermaszewski was his name. He died a few years ago. Actually, he was originally my grandfather's student at the Air Force Academy, and that transitioned into that. And my grandpa, was stuck behind the geopolitical realities of his time, but was very progressive, more capitalistic thinking. So he also they're hidden in storage in Warsaw. So the earliest works I know of around the concept of democratizing access to space. So those things are really the roots and the values that sit behind Copernic Space. And And my mother, similarly to him, he somehow got his works published by NASA out of what was then communist Poland. So I think, I think history has a lot of people kind of lost in it that were revolutionary thinkers and creators that were stuck behind certain realities or under certain rocks that were never fully, recognized. So I think he's one of those people. And without him and what that built, through my mother and into me, Copernic Space wouldn't be here.
So your mom escaped communist Poland and ended up running Compaq across Central Europe. What did growing up around Lady Rocket do to your wiring?
Yeah, so I say she's more popular than I am for sure as a person. Back to like the origins, it's not that she just escaped it. It's like back to my grandpa at NASA. She got a scholarship to Eastern Washington out of communist Poland, which is pretty much unheard of itself. But then it's not like they're like, okay, go to our enemy now, please. So she and my grandpa went, to whoever he could in the government to get her, the allowance to leave. They said no, so she had to escape through Italy, landed in DC. Story that's known. $5 in your pocket, not exactly a native speaker. And she eventually landed up early stages kind of Silicon Valley tech computer boom. And eventually she beat out, loads of seasoned, typical executives to land the job of bringing what was the largest computer company in the world at the time, Compaq, into Central and Eastern Europe after communism fell. Also a very patriotic person. And she wanted to bring, let's say, the American technological, economical, cultural benefits and know-how into specifically Poland as the largest market in the area. And she did that. So I spent a few years in Poland in the 90s as well as she was building that. And to your question, she's not your typical tech executive type, extremely visionary, extremely ballsy, knock down any door. And she's a brand. She's a character herself that brings a lot of value just by, I like to say she's like a light on in a dark room full of moths and stuff. She just brings things to her and is a true visionary.
Wow, cool. So where did you grow up? California, Poland, both? What did your childhood look like?
Yeah, I'm born in Laguna Beach actually, but didn't live there very long. I actually say that my character is a little bit more Midwestern. My dad's originally from Detroit. I went to high school in Indianapolis, spent my formative, let's say, age 4 to almost 10 in Warsaw. So, went to an American school in Warsaw, very international sort of upbringing. So I've kind of gone everywhere. Right after I graduated high school, I went back to LA, started my first startup. So I've been on the super highs and been on the super, lows from my street. First startup failing, 2008-9 economic and financial collapse. Being in LA especially was really intense during that time. Which is, made me develop. I feel very comfortable from, penthouse boardroom all down on the street level. And I think it's created a callus around me that contributes to my perseverance. I like to say, almost every startup fails because the founders give up. So my dad being from Detroit, he's older, so he grew up in Detroit a long time ago. And my mom, coming from her background and kind of my experience, has enabled me to not give up no matter how hard it might get sometimes when you're building new transformative things. It's, we always like to hear, the stories, the big success stories, but rarely you hear like the true realities of like what building a startup is like and how that is mentally and emotionally.
So were you the kid building rockets in the garage, or did the space thing skip a generation and hit you later?
Uh, so I'm more of an artist personality. Both my parents. So my other grandfather was, my guess is I'm a little bit more like he was than even my father, than I'm like my father. He was a jazz percussionist, had his own jazz band, and was an entrepreneurial type. My mom is extremely creative. My father is more sales, marketing, biz dev. So I like to say that I won't build you a rocket. I'm not as smart in that sort of way as my grandfather was. I'm just smart enough and just dumb enough, to see the macroeconomic solution that's needed for space. I think, you've worked with a lot of guys that are probably, 140 IQ or whatever it is. But it takes a different personality to, I think, build something in this sort of manner. And then you get the guys who are smarter than you to fill in, the gaps. I think good leadership is partially recognizing kind of where you're not the smartest and not always try to be the smartest guy in the room.
So before any of this, like the blockchain space stuff, what was the first business or hustle that made you realize you were a builder?
Well, music is my first like love and creative form, and I still have companies associated with that doing really great things. But I originally come out of in relation to that, the digital media space. So my first startups were back to being kind of early and visionary around things. This was 2006 going into 2007. We built a mobile video distribution platform along with programming channels with integrated branding for cell phones. iPhone wasn't out yet. We were programming on Palm Treos, which I still think is the most underrated smartphone ever created because it was the only one you could program on that was touchscreen. And really, we were building standards that, 5-6 years later became kind of, when we started building it, people were like, why would I watch anything on my phone? Right. And we even thought, like, to the middle ground, we even thought it's like, well, people probably won't spend, they won't watch a 2-hour movie or anything like that. So we called them push casts and we made them 15 minutes, integrate branding into it. And we weren't using streaming. We built a whole different video distribution technology called push casting. And so that's my first foray into startups. And I learned what timing and maturity is around that as it didn't work out. It's a lot harder sometimes and more painful to be very early than it is to be even a little late.
Yeah, tell me about it. Hey, I was gonna ask you, what did you learn watching your mom go from where she started to Fortune 10 executive that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
So when she was at Compaq, she started that when I was about 4 or 5. So it's funny when I'm in Poland, people that worked for her or around her, eventually some of them became kind of big guys, titans of certain businesses here in Poland. And it's like, they remember me sitting like in the corner in the boardroom and stuff like that. So I kind of have that. Again, I feel comfortable in that sort of environment. And also it's kind of like the fearlessness. I have a little bit more fear than she does, but I'm also like, I feel very good on stage. So, and that mainly comes from her, as well as my father, who's like the OG classic, great American, salesman. He was selling computers when they were the size of this room, and he came out of GM and stuff. And people forget that like GM was building, even computers for the original space program and stuff. So, he taught me a lot of things, as well as like, Grant, like people will want to do business with you more probably if they feel better about themselves when they're around you. Like those are just some of the small classic, American sort of sales things that if you've lived internationally, you see those differences quite a bit. And, Americans aren't known for having the highest IQ. So it's like, okay, what's the cultural thing outside of market size that makes us extremely successful in these things? And I would say it's that sort of approach around things. So I'm a weird combination of both of them, to be honest. But yeah, she's had a big inspiration on me as far as just like take big home run swings and don't be scared. And she told me when I was young, like, if you feel comfortable for like an extended period of time, you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah, I like that one. So take us to CoinFirm 2016. What did you and the team see that nobody else did about crypto compliance?
Yeah, so I actually remember the first time I met two of what eventually became what we call the core five, so the five co-founders. I'm not a financial guy traditionally. AML compliance is not my background at all. But I think one of my talents is that I don't have to be a specialist in anything. I can take a look at it pretty quickly and understand what are the dots that are going to be connected and foresee what has to happen or what will happen in that particular market. So for me, I was doing some work trying to apply blockchain to a major media company here in Central Europe. And I just saw, it's like, okay, if crypto is going to be an actual thing, which I believed it was, it's not going to, it can't only exist outside the realms of how the market kind of works, right? And what's going to be that key kind of bridge and layer around that. And with the emergence of, more advanced machine learning analytics, this of course transferred into AI, which to me, most of it is just advanced machine learning. We could also completely change the realities of what AML was overall, which was very manual, very ineffective, and in a lot of ways was used regulatorily as a blocker from smaller competition entering into the financial market. Because if I'm two guys trying to build a company and I have to have an AML layer and I need to hire 10, 100 people to even service that, it's like, okay, that's not a future I think we really want. So it just made sense to me, and the team was great. People come out of like original crypto people, original crypto programmers, and AML, focus specialists.
And you've also said that CoinFirm was a better product than Chainalysis, but lost on U.S. government strategy. What's the lesson, and does it shape how you sell Copernic now?
Yeah. And again, inspiration from my mother around this, but with the coin firm aspect and what you mentioned there, for example, Poland has like the best programmers and product builders you can generally find. You can look at the rosters of the big AI companies in Silicon Valley to validate that. But the problem with entrepreneurs in a lot of the world, but here for sure, is that they think product will win out. And you even see it in their startup pitches. It's like they forego their stories, the broader story and things like that. And it's like, hey, my name is Jacek and here's my product, right? And in reality, it's there's something, not just strategy around it, but the kind of story you want to sell with it. So, there were, let's say, some cultural clashes for me around that, because I'm much more into the big picture and the story and, being the token American, so to say, my big want was pushing it into the US market. I can't say that I wanted to push it into the government realms, especially for something like AML. I don't know if that's the thing I feel most comfortable with. From my value set anyways. But there's a trait that Americans definitely don't have, but most of the world does. And especially places that have gone through a lot, like Poland or Eastern Europe has, which is I call toxic humility. So I think it's like, all right, let's take, a step. It's like the Japanese saying of like, the nail that sticks out gets the hammer sort of mentality idea. So, I mean, it's the biggest, learning lesson of my life. And I'm sure there's a million things I could have personally done better to turn it into a company worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. because the smart guys that we had around and girls that we had around the product built it into an automated AML engine versus what a lot of the guys in the industry start doing, have big teams in the back kind of digging and stuff like that. So we took something that in the traditional market is like 2% effectiveness, and we're putting it into the 80-90 percentiles. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Well, what was the actual moment you realized that space was going to be the biggest asset class in human history?
Actually, kind of around the time we were doing coin firm, actually the first ever public coin firm presentation, back to the media company I was doing stuff with, that's run by kind of a media mogul out here in Central Europe. And he, along with my mother and I, did a conference like really early, stage, just focused on space and defense. And I brought the coin firm guys, and instead of talking about AML, our CTO was very young that time, but very smart guy. We built the concept of actually like crypto mining in space. This is before Blockstream, actually, started talking about putting nodes or doing nodes in space and things like that. So it was already there. In the years beforehand, my mother and I were kind of early people on the ground in California, at SpaceX, some of the first SpaceX rocket launches. And we're already kind of being like, okay, how can we turn this into, a market, combine our marketplace, the crypto. It's like, even if you like read Hal Finney's works outside of, we can argue about the Bitcoin white paper, but if you read about some of his other works, he already foresaw like, tokenized baseball cards, so to say, on chain and things like that. So if you understood, again, like where this technology could go, then you could see that you could turn almost anything into a programmable digital asset. And, for millions of things flying around in space, that sense of physical ownership, et cetera, and verification really isn't there so much. So the perfect technology for that would be, blockchain based. And same thing on the financing end. At Coin Firm, we were the first to be able to analyze ERC tokens. So we were servicing some of the biggest ICOs in 2017, et cetera. And we did one ourselves that I managed. And we just saw that, okay, like, regardless what you think, whether this project is legit or this is not legit, whatever it is, it's like, okay, here's a model, right? And here's the technology, and the use cases are there to show that it works. So the combination of all of that was like, that's the aha moment, that people talk about. So that's why we focus on it being at Copernic Space, it being a circular, sustainable economic infrastructure that goes from financing of assets to commercialization of assets, providing returns to the liquidity providers that finance the asset.
So you frame Copernic as the Dutch East India Company of the second age of exploration, right? So can you walk me through that analogy, because it's a heavy claim?
Yeah, excluding all the the controversial things that happen around Dutch East India Company, what you had then was first era of exploration. There's new ship technologies, et cetera, that enabled us to faster, better, safer, cheaper access the Americas, Asia, and all those related assets there. And they built really the financial infrastructure in the marketplace, which standards sit in our economy today, shared companies, et cetera. These are all things that emerged then. So what did they do? They enable new access beyond, the king, the queen, and very, very exclusive, limited amount of people to the broader market, diversified risk. So it wasn't just like, I have to invest into Dutch East India Company itself, right? Like you could invest into missions, voyages, whatever you want to call it. And then you provided the marketplace to trade the assets that came out of those voyages that then provided the returns to the liquidity providers. And space is the second era of exploration. There's a lot of, similarities around that. And we represent this new age of economic financial infrastructure in the marketplace that will serve as this horizontal layer fueling um, uh, the space economy. And we have the unique opportunity in a moment in time to put it on a new technology stack with new models, new values, and make it as democratized as possible, so that whether you're a fund with $100 million or a guy on your couch who's passionate about space, which there's countless millions of people like that across the world, that you have the same access point. And same thing from the commercial end. It's like, okay, how can we fractionalize these big commercial assets? So like, whether I am a corporate, a startup, or again, a guy on his couch, I could potentially, send something up on a lunar mission like we proved last year.
So plain English, right? So if I'm an investor or like a regular person watching this, what does Copernic Space actually let them do?
The financing thing's a little bit more complicated right now, because to do that at any sort of public scale, we're still going to have to go through some regulatory processes. But the article I published today was actually on the Clarity Act and how that will relate towards what we do in the space economy. But let's just say both of these sides are fully operational. So we segregate the space asset class into two categories: what we call real world space assets. So those are the commercially viable, unique, with utility assets, payload space and rockets, the payloads themselves, data, in orbit compute, satellite imagery, I can keep going, IP, and financial space assets, which are the tokenized programmable vehicles for investing into the infrastructure or the assets themselves, right? So it's like, let's take Moon Mission 1, what we proved with that, which is a fund that we're really close with. Went to them, we said, hey, we're going to acquire a what we call digital payload. It's a standard we built as well. We're going to acquire this lunar payload. We're going to fractionalize it and resell it to our user base. For the liquidity you provide, you get a percentage of the commercial revenue that payload generates. We said, okay, they gave us the liquidity, acquired the payload, commercialized it, and we 3x them in 5 months. And the big issue with space is, like, even if you get the privileged access to invest in it through the avenues available, it's like, all right, what's my liquidity event timeline? 10 years, they got to go public. What is it? So if you can take that sort of model and scale it, you're really changing the dynamic, both, from a funding, financing, as well as a commercialization angle for space. Now you just extrapolate that and apply it to, whether it's a satellite, it's a rocket, it's another moon mission, it's a AI data center in space. Like, you can apply, a variety of models that, again, I think, crypto has shown that it's doable, and the regulatory environment is catching up to allow that.
So you landed tokenized assets on the moon in March 2025, right? Over 2,000 of them. What does that prove that nobody can argue with anymore?
Well, back to the financing and the commercialization. And I mean, we proved that, like, we had anybody from other space companies, brands, to artists and just individuals that, like, hey, I always wanted my father or my family photo in space, right? And lying underneath that is, interestingly enough, a basic question that no one's really formally answering, which, what represents, like, verified, authenticated ownership of assets in space? So we weren't only, tokenizing the physical space, the payload space, and fractionalizing it for the clients accordingly, but we're actually in the process right now of certifying, authenticating, and tokenizing ownership of the assets that are on the lunar surface themselves. So whether, it's something big and expensive and technological, like a rover, to a Nike shoe, to an image, there's a standard that works, ubiquitously, horizontally, across the market around that. So we're in a, another one of the unique opportunities around space is like you get to build standards for a whole market and asset class. Even the language, the term real world space asset we defined before RWAs was a thing. So, of course, challenges come along with, building, improving standards for a whole market. But again, I think it's the biggest opportunity that a lot of people are missing generally, and not just in space, is like that whole side of things. It's, again, I can't build you the rocket and figure that out, but I can figure out and implement and prove this.
So you've got a rocket sale running right now, and then more moon missions later this year. What's the
Yeah.
next 12 months look like?
So we want to launch version 2 of our platform, hopefully in Q3. We've learned a lot, over the past couple of years, with version 1 of the platform, et cetera. And there's a bunch of legacy assets that we'll, of course, put on version 2, as well as open up the secondary market. So people will be able to trade ownership and rights of like those lunar assets that are already on the moon from the mission last year. But right now we're doing a sale. This is technically our second sale with this company. They're called Space Forest. They're in top 10 European rocket companies. Where we're enabling access both to the physical payload inside, as well as something that's quite unique, which is the outside of the rocket. So turning the outside of the rocket into, brand space, art space, etc. So there's an opportunity for people to put, stickers of their art or their brand on the outside. So again, providing new access points into the space economy. It's supposed to go up in August, and after that, we follow our standard and we authenticate, get the certifications, tokenize all of that, so they have verified ownership that their assets went to space. So we have, for example, a custom watch collection made with, Swiss parts, made just for this mission, 10 watches going up, coming down, which is a cool thing because you can take terrestrial assets and transform them into more unique, rare, therefore valuable real world space assets, and take a watch that might be worth a couple thousand and turn it into tens of thousands in that particular case. And because we control the secondary market, technically around it, we also perpetually earn on, these resales as well.
And why
Oh,
is
sorry, I didn't fully answer your question. And we have another around 500 unique assets going up with nanofiche. That's going to be within Astrobotics lunar lander, hopefully, towards the end of the year. Space moon stuff especially moves quite a bit. We've experienced that already. So, and then we have other deals around satellite imagery, compute in orbit. So we're setting standards for further asset type verticals, because I can't treat like a satellite imagery license or computation rights the same way I treat a payload, a physical payload, right, or whatever.
cool, Grant? I had a whole bunch more questions, but I think we're nearing the end of the interview. I'd love to have you back on a second time if you're up for it. But maybe help me. I was going to say land the plane, but let's say land the rocket. 3 generations into this, right? So what's the legacy you're trying to leave for your family and for the people who own a piece of the moon because of you?
Well, it's my grandfather. My grandfather died about 10 years ago. So it's very, we sent his images up to the moon and stuff like that. So I'm very sad that he didn't get to see me expand on his work. When I was a little kid, Purdue University in Indiana is like the astronaut school. That's, one of the biggest space universities ever. And there's pictures of me with him when I'm like 3, where he's just so excited to be there. He always wanted to go there. So I think legacy is important. If you have something you can grab as a legacy and build on it, I think, there is some sort of value in your soul, even if it's a challenge. So that's really important for me. But I think the big picture is again, space to me is the most important market. I call it an umbrella market. It touches, it's going to touch every market you can think of. We already see it's going to be affecting AI here in the near future strongly. And I think one thing space has failed to communicate is the value it's been creating the past 60 years that affects life on Earth. A lot of this, tech here, whatever it is, its initial applications come out of space. Solar panels were built for satellites and works best in space. And now that the market's privatizing and a platform like ours is coming along that enables that access, it can fuel that even further. So I think a lot of the terrestrial challenges that we need solutions for on Earth are going to be fulfilled by space, and there's going to be a massive economic boom around that as well. And I think it's in the best interest of the world that as many people have a potential stake in that boom economically, as well as the drip down benefits that it provides to improve life on Earth, whether you're doing agriculture or robotics, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that was quite the realization for me as well when I saw that Claude SpaceX deal happen a couple days ago. Because like one of the biggest complaints about AI right now is that it just takes so much energy, and then you've got climate concerns and all these other things, and people protesting. But you get your data centers up in space, all of a sudden all those concerns go away, and you can see
Nuclear
how.
energy, same thing. The one of the founders of Robinhood, left, and he's focused on doing what? Beaming energy around that's gathered from space. If you're going to mess around with nuclear, you might as well do it in radiation intense environments that don't, affect Earth. The data center thing, it's like, I saw a video today where somebody's sitting in their backyard and they just have the audio on, and it's just, because they built a data center or whatever, 100 yards or whatever from them. So, the profit margin, of course, is important to a lot of people and a lot of things and put things, but we need to start thinking a little bit more 5-10 years ahead and build towards that versus like, okay, how can I do the best returns next quarter at the sacrifice for the long term benefit or even profitability long term.
Awesome. Well, Grant, thank you. That was a lot of fun. That was awesome. I learned a lot. Yeah, let's bring this one to a close. Anything else you want to share in parting? I guess just maybe the website for Copernic at least.
Yeah, copernicspace.com. Copernic is short for Copernicus because he was originally Polish, and his name in Polish is not Copernicus, it's Copernic. We just Anglophied it. So it's COPERNIC space.com. We're very community and public driven, so find us on social media. We do X Spaces usually twice a week, so you can come and talk to me and Lady Rocket as well. And if you want to, start participating today, whether you're a brand or an individual, we have that rocket sale up right now for a couple more weeks. And yeah, contact us. We're as accessible of a, definitely for a space company, but generally as a startup as you can find.
Thank you, Grant. And thank you all for tuning in. And yeah, until next time, cheers. Hang on for 1 second, Grant. Let me bring this one to an end.